You're sitting at your desk on a Friday afternoon and you pull up your company's HR portal to look at your pay stub. You do this every couple of months, mostly just to torture yourself. You look at the top line, the gross pay. It's a nice, solid number. You think, wow, I actually make a decent living. But then your eyes travel down the screen to the deductions column. You see the federal income tax, you see the state tax, you see your health insurance premium, and then you see the line item for FICA, Social Security, and Medicare. It is a massive chunk of money. Every single time you get paid, hundreds of dollars are siphoned out of your labor and sent off to the government. And you just sit there staring at that missing money and you try to comfort yourself with the standard socially acceptable narrative. You tell yourself, well, it hurts now, but that money is going into a vault with my name on it. I'm paying my dues. When I'm old and tired and my knees hurt, the government is going to open that vault and take care of me. That's the deal. It's Karen. I study how people think about money and why it shapes their outcomes. And honestly, watching the working class blindly trust a demographic math problem that broke 20 years ago is one of the most terrifying things I see. Because the vault you are picturing in your head, it doesn't exist. It is entirely empty. Right now, in 2026, we are standing on the beach watching the water recede, completely oblivious to the massive macroeconomic tidal wave that is building on the horizon. It is called the silver squeeze. The American economy was built on a very specific, mathematically rigid demographic pyramid, and right now that pyramid is violently inverting. A massive, unprecedented generation of people is exiting the workforce and entering the extraction phase of their lives, while a smaller, financially exhausted generation is being asked to foot the bill. The math is breaking, the trust funds are running dry, and the people in charge have absolutely no intention of fixing it until it is too late. Today, we are going to tear down the illusion of the government safety net. We are going to look at the brutal reality of the Medicare and Social Security depletion clocks, expose the stealth taxes coming for your paycheck, and explain how the aging population is quietly bankrupting the medical system from the inside out. Most importantly, we are going to talk about how you can legally and systematically opt out of the collapse. We are going to build a private financial fortress so you don't end up as collateral damage in the greatest intergenerational wealth transfer in human history. Grab a cup of coffee. We have some very uncomfortable math to do. To understand the panic of the silver squeeze, you first have to completely unlearn everything you were taught about how your retirement taxes actually work. We have this incredibly stubborn, comforting myth in our society. We believe that Social Security and Medicare operate like a giant national 401k. We think that when the government takes that 7.65% out of our paycheck every 2 weeks, they take our specific dollars, put them into an account with our Social Security number on it, and invest it so it can grow until we turn 65. That is mathematically, structurally, and legally false. The American entitlement system operates on what is called a pay-as-you-go model. When you get paid on Friday and the government takes your FICA taxes, that money does not go into a vault for your future. It goes directly, immediately out the back door to pay the medical bills and the monthly stipends of the people who are retired right now. Your labor today is funding your grandmother's hip replacement tomorrow. You are not investing in your own future. You are servicing the liabilities of the present. Now, when this system was designed back in the 1930s and expanded in the 1960s, it was a stroke of mathematical genius. Why? Because of the demographics. It looked like a perfect pyramid. In the 1950s, there were roughly 16 active workers paying into the system for one retiree pulling money out. Think about that ratio. 16 people chipping in a tiny fraction of their paycheck easily, comfortably supports one elderly person. The burden was incredibly light. The system was flush with cash. In fact, it generated massive surpluses for decades. But then, biology happened. The baby boomer generation, the largest, most prosperous demographic cohort in human history, stopped having 6 kids per family. They had 2 kids. Then those kids had 1 kid, or maybe just bought a dog instead. The birth rate plummeted. Simultaneously, medical technology became miraculous. Life expectancy shot up. Instead of retiring at 65 and passing away at 70, people are retiring at 65 and living comfortably into their late 80s or 90s. The pyramid inverted. It turned into a column, and now it's turning into an upside-down triangle. Today, in 2026, we do not have 16 workers supporting one retiree. The ratio has collapsed. We are hovering near 2.7 workers for every one beneficiary, and the math is projected to drop even closer to 2 to 1 in the coming years. You do not need to be a Wall Street actuary to understand the physics of this problem. When you have two exhausted, inflation-battered, debt-ridden middle-class workers trying to carry the financial weight of one retiree who is consuming massive amounts of hyper-expensive modern medical care, the bridge collapses. The math simply doesn't work. We hear the phrase silver tsunami thrown around in financial media all the time, usually buried in some dry academic report. But I want to translate that phrase into the brutal, physical reality of the 2026 economy. Every single day in the United States, roughly 10,000 people turn 65 years old. 10,000 people every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This isn't a temporary spike. This is a sustained, decade-long demographic tidal wave. We are watching millions of highly skilled, highly experienced human beings pack up their desks, sell their businesses, and permanently exit the labor force. When they leave the workforce, two catastrophic economic shifts happen simultaneously. First, they stop paying FICA taxes. They transition from being the engine of the economy to being the passengers. They are no longer putting money into the pay-as-you-go system. They are now pulling money out. The revenue stream feeding the government trust funds shrinks. Second, they enter the most expensive phase of human existence, the medical extraction phase. Aging is not cheap. The older we get, the more maintenance our bodies require. The baby boomers are transitioning into an era of joint replacements, chronic disease management, cardiovascular care, and massive pharmaceutical reliance. And they are completely legally entitled to this care. They paid into the system for 40 years. They played by the rules. They were promised Medicare, and they're using it. But the sheer volume of 10,000 people a day hitting the system is buckling the infrastructure of the country. Hospitals are overwhelmed. There is a massive, terrifying shortage of nurses, geriatric specialists, and home health aides. When a system has an unlimited demographic demand for services, but a shrinking, burned-out supply of workers to provide those services, the cost of the care goes absolutely parabolic. The silver tsunami is not a future threat. It is currently making landfall in every hospital, every pharmacy, and every tax bracket in the country, and the bill is being handed directly to the generations still clocking in on Monday morning. So if the ratio of workers to retirees has collapsed and the cost of healthcare is exploding, how is the government actually paying for all of this right now? They are draining the reserves. Remember those massive surpluses the system generated back in the 1980s and 1990s when the demographics were favorable? The government took that surplus cash, put it into special trust funds, and essentially wrote themselves IOUs in the form of treasury bonds. For the last few years, because the FICA taxes coming in haven't been enough to cover the benefits going out, the government has been aggressively cashing in those IOUs to make up the difference. They are bleeding the trust funds dry just to keep the lights on. And we know exactly when the lights are going to flicker. The government actually publishes the data. It is public math, but nobody wants to look at it because it is terrifying. Let's look at the Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, Part A. This is the fund that pays for inpatient hospital stays, nursing facilities, and hospice care for seniors. For years, the actuaries have been warning us about the depletion date. Depending on the economic growth models and policy shifts, the projected depletion date for the Medicare Trust Fund has hovered ominously around the late 2020s to early 2030s, often cited as early as 2026 or 2028 in worst-case scenarios, and maybe stretched to 2033 if they squeeze the budget. And then there is Social Security. The Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is staring down the barrel of insolvency somewhere around 2032 or 2034. Now, I want to be very clear about what insolvency actually means, because fearmongers love to misuse this word. Insolvency does not mean the system goes bankrupt and the balance drops to absolute zero. It does not mean Social Security disappears and your grandmother starves in the street. Remember, it is a pay-as-you-go system. Taxes are still coming in from the active workers every 2 weeks. Insolvency simply means the reserve funds are completely gone. The buffer is erased. Once the trust fund is depleted, the government can only pay out what it collects in taxes that exact same year. If the Social Security Trust Fund depletes in 2033, the math dictates an automatic across-the-board benefit cut of roughly 20 to 24% for every single retiree in America. If your mom is expecting a $2,000 monthly check, she gets a letter in the mail saying, "Sorry, the math broke. Here is $1,500. If the Medicare Trust Fund depletes, the government suddenly can only cover 85 or 89% of the hospital bills. This is the ticking clock. We are less than a decade away from a mathematically mandated, catastrophic haircut to the American safety net. And the politicians in Washington are playing a massive game of chicken, refusing to touch the issue because fixing it requires inflicting intense financial pain on voters. We need to zoom out and look at what this demographic crunch is doing to the broader economy. Because even if you are 30 years old, healthy, and decades away from claiming Medicare, the silver squeeze is actively destroying your disposable income right now. It happens through the healthcare inflation vortex. When you have millions of seniors consuming massive amounts of highly complex medical care, the entire healthcare industry has to scale up to meet the demand. Hospitals have to build new wings, they have to buy multi-million-dollar diagnostic machines, they have to pay astronomical salaries to attract the shrinking pool of doctors and nurses. The baseline cost of delivering medicine in America goes up. Now, remember how Medicare works. The government sets the prices it is willing to pay. When an elderly person goes to the hospital for a procedure, Medicare tells the hospital, "We are only paying you $5,000 for this. Take it or leave it." But the hospital knows that the actual raw cost of performing that procedure, keeping the lights on and paying the staff, is $7,000. Every time they treat a Medicare patient, the hospital takes a $2,000 loss on their balance sheet. So how does a hospital survive if they are losing money on the largest, fastest-growing demographic of their patient base? They shift the cost. They look at you, the 35-year-old with the private, employer-sponsored health insurance plan. The hospital goes to Blue Cross or United Healthcare and says, "Hey, we are bleeding cash on the Medicare side, so we are raising our prices for your private insurance network by 20%. That simple blood test is now $400. That urgent care visit is now $350. Your private insurance company sighs, pays the higher hospital rates, and then turns around and raises your monthly premium from $600 to $800. They raise your family deductible from $4,000 to $6,000. You are subsidizing the silver squeeze. The reason you are terrified to go to the doctor, the reason your high deductible health plan feels like a complete scam, is because the healthcare system is using the working class as a financial shock absorber. The sheer demographic weight of the aging population is driving up the baseline cost of care. The government refuses to pay the true cost, and the difference is extracted directly from your paycheck via inflated private premiums. You are paying for the crisis long before you ever set foot in a hospital. So the math is broken, the trust funds are dying, and the hospitals are cost shifting. How does this movie end? When the clock finally strikes midnight in the 2030s, how does the government solve the insolvency crisis? There are only 3 ways to fix a broken math problem of this magnitude. You cut benefits, you raise taxes, or you print money, inflation. Let's look at option 1, cutting benefits. Will the politicians actually let the automatic 24% benefit cut hit the baby boomers? Will they tell the largest, wealthiest, and most politically active voting bloc in the history of the country that their checks are getting slashed by a quarter? Absolutely not. That is political suicide. The seniors vote. They vote in every single midterm, local, and presidential election. No politician who wants to keep their job will allow a headline that says Congress slashes grandma's Social Security. So cutting benefits for the current retirees is off the table. That leaves option 2, raising taxes. And who do you raise taxes on? You raise them on the people who are currently working. You raise them on the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen X. We are going to see an unprecedented, highly aggressive intergenerational tax squeeze over the next decade. The government will quietly, methodically raise the FICA tax limits. Right now, you only pay Social Security taxes on a certain amount of your income, the wage-based limit. They will uncap that limit. They will subject your entire salary to the 7.65% extraction. They will invent new surtaxes. They will means test the benefits, meaning if you actually did a good job saving in your 401k, the government will look at your wealth when you retire and say, oh, you don't need this Social Security check. We are going to keep it to pay for someone else. They will inevitably raise the retirement age. For anyone under the age of 40 right now, the idea of receiving full government benefits at 65 or 67 is a fantasy. They will push the goalpost to 70 or 72. They will force you to labor longer to fund the retirement of the generation above you while simultaneously delaying your own ability to rest. And finally, option 3, inflation. The government will quietly print trillions of dollars to bridge the funding gaps, which devalues the currency. You will pay for the silver squeeze at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and in your utility bills. The burden of this demographic inversion is going to be placed entirely, squarely on the shoulders of the working middle class. You are the only source of revenue left. If all of this is true, if the data is public, the clocks are ticking, and the tax squeeze is mathematically guaranteed, why isn't anyone rioting in the streets? Why are we just passively accepting this? Because the human brain is spectacularly bad at processing slow-moving, long-term threats. If I told you that a tiger was going to break into your house tomorrow, you would buy a lock, buy a weapon, and stay awake all night. Your amygdala would trigger, and you would take immediate defensive action. But if I tell you that an actuarial deficit in a government trust fund is going to permanently reduce your standard of living in 8 years, your brain just kind of shrugs. It feels abstract. It feels like a problem for future you. Furthermore, we are completely exhausted by the present. When you are trying to figure out how to pay $115 for a tank of gas and you are terrified that your job is going to be replaced by an AI algorithm next month, you do not have the cognitive bandwidth to stress about the insolvency of the Medicare Part A trust fund. You are living in a state of perpetual triage. You are just trying to survive until Friday. The government relies on this exhaustion. They rely on your apathy. They know that as long as the crisis moves slowly and the tax hikes are implemented gradually, the middle class will just sigh, adjust their budgets, and keep working. They boil the frog 1 degree at a time. But apathy is a luxury you cannot afford. If you just close your eyes, cross your fingers, and hope the politicians figure it out, you are volunteering to be the shock absorber for the collapse. You are agreeing to let the government extract your wealth to fix their broken pyramid scheme. You have to wake up. You have to look at the math, accept the brutal unfairness of the demographic shift, and decide that your family is not going to be collateral damage. All right, the pyramid is inverted, the safety net is full of holes, the taxes are going up. What do you actually do about it? How do you survive the silver squeeze? You have to completely secede from the societal expectation of retirement. You have to operate under the absolute cynical assumption that the government will provide you with exactly $0 and zero health care when you are old. If they do end up giving you a check, great, that's bonus money. You can use it to buy expensive coffee, but it cannot be the foundational pillar of your survival. You have to build a private, bulletproof financial fortress. Here is the blueprint. Step 1. Maximize the HSA, the ultimate medical moat. If you have access to a high-deductible health plan, you must open a health savings account and fund it aggressively. The HSA is the only triple tax-advantaged account in the American tax code. Money goes in tax-free, it grows tax-free, and it comes out tax-free for medical expenses. But here is the secret. Do not use it for your medical expenses today. Pay for your antibiotics out of pocket. Leave the HSA money invested in the S&P 500. let it compound for 20 or 30 years. When you are 70 years old and the Medicare system is in absolute shambles, you will have a massive, private, tax-free vault of cash explicitly designated to pay for your health care. You will not be at the mercy of the government's rationing. You will buy your own care. Step 2. The Roth conversion strategy. Beat the tax squeeze. We know taxes are going up. The government has to squeeze the working class to pay for the boomers. Therefore, deferring your taxes until retirement is a massive mathematical risk. If you put all your money in a traditional 401k, you are partnering with the government. When you pull the money out in 20 years, the government decides what their cut is. If tax rates double, your wealth is cut in half. You need to pivot to Roth accounts. Pay the taxes today at historically low rates. Lock the money away. When you pull it out in retirement, it is 100% tax-free, regardless of how desperate the government is for revenue. You're essentially buying tax immunity. Step 3. Hyper-aggressive liquidity. The people who get crushed by macroeconomic shifts are the people whose wealth is entirely trapped in illiquid assets, like primary residences or pensions they can't access. You must build a massive taxable brokerage account. Buy broad market index funds. This money is liquid. If the government changes the rules or if the economy in your country stagnates under the weight of the aging population, you can click a button on a Tuesday, liquidate your assets, and move your life. Agility is the ultimate defense against a desperate bureaucracy. Step 4. Take radical care of your biology. This is not a finance tip, but it is the most important financial advice you will ever receive. The medical system in 2040 is going to be a nightmare. It will be underfunded, understaffed, and catastrophically expensive. The absolute best way to survive the healthcare crisis is to refuse to become a customer. You must treat your physical health like it is a multi-million-dollar asset class. You cannot afford to eat highly processed garbage. You cannot afford to be sedentary. You must lift weights, you must protect your cardiovascular health, and you must prioritize your sleep. Every single chronic disease you prevent through diet and exercise today is hundreds of thousands of dollars you will save in your 70s. You are investing in biological independence. If you stay healthy, you don't need the broken Medicare system. You win by default. I know it feels overwhelmingly bleak to look at the future of the safety net and realize the math is broken. It's a betrayal. We were all sold a very comforting lie about how society takes care of its own, and it's infuriating to realize that the bill has been passed down to a generation that is already struggling to buy groceries. It is completely valid to feel angry that you are paying 7.65% of your income into a system that will likely give you pennies on the dollar when it's your turn to collect. But anger is not a hedge against inflation. Complaining about the boomers will not fund your retirement. You cannot wait for politicians to miraculously develop the courage to fix a broken demographic pyramid. They won't. They will kick the can down the road until the road runs out, and then they will tax you to pave a new one. You have to take the reins. You have to look at the silver squeeze, acknowledge the tidal wave that is coming, and start building your ark. When you aggressively fund your own accounts, when you buy your tax immunity through Roth strategies, and when you take ruthless care of your physical health, you completely detach yourself from the fragility of the government math. You stop being a passenger on a sinking ship, and you become the captain of your own fleet. The system is bankrupt, but you do not have to be. Look at your pay stub, accept the reality of the extraction, and then go build a life that doesn't need their permission to thrive. You've got this. I'll see you in the next one.